Mystery bookshops. What more could you ask for? Lots of mist, there's falling leaves, there's like fungus in the woods, so there's isolation, there's rats, there's bugs and cockroaches, and there's tight spaces. And hi friends, it's Gwen. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to share my fall reading recommendations with you. I have over 40 books to share with you today, so I'm going to try to make it as quick as possible. Let's go ahead and jump in with some illustrated type books. The first one is Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell. You knew this was going to be on this list. I absolutely loved this. I read it last year. It's perfect for harvest season. These two work in a pumpkin patch. We have a character of color, plus she is plus size. We love to see it. Story about a girl that works in a laundromat and there is a ghost, and it's called Sheets by Brianna Tremler, and it also has a really pretty color palette and layout, and I just adore this story. Next up is a heavy illustrated book, and that is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. It isn't a graphic novel, it is actually a story. It just has lots of in-story, on-page illustrations, full page, half page, all of the things, and it's a really deep, sad story about a boy that sees a monster and what the monster represents. A fantasy recommendation is my illustrated edition of The Hobbit. I recommend this to you guys all the time, but for good reason. It's a really great story to read in autumn time, but I just love the illustrations that are in here as well. So if you're struggling to read the story but you really want to, I highly recommend picking up the illustrated edition. The cover's really gorgeous. It's a cloth bound edition. I have a few poetry collections for you. Of course, I'm going to shout out Amanda Lovelace's collection. I've been sharing this a lot on my Instagram. The first one is To Make Monsters Out of Girls, and the second one is To Drink Coffee with Ghosts. This collection is about a toxic, like, intimate relationship, but I do like that it ends on a hopeful note. And the second one is about the poet's relationship with her mother, which also is not rainbows and unicorns, but it also ends on a hopeful note. So these both start pretty dark and they end up on a more hopeful note. And while they aren't directly fall related, they definitely have the great imagery for fall, and the illustrations are great for fall inside and outside. I also mentioned this and posted about this on my Instagram, and it is Mystics and Mundane by Sabrina Rourke. She is a booktuber and a poet and a friend of mine. Highly recommend you pick up this poetry collection. It's just like a fae in the woods, and it's mystical and magical and eerie at the same time. I recommend cozy mysteries to you guys. I've only read one, but I am hooked, and I'm so excited to continue in this series. But there are tons and tons of cozy mysteries out there to choose from, but the one that I'm going to recommend is The Plot is Murder by V.M. Burns. This series is just going to be so much fun. I think I really enjoyed the first book. The main character opens a mystery bookshop, but she is also writing her own mystery, so you get two mysteries in one, and I just loved it so much. So mystery bookshops, what more could you ask for? Nonfiction recommendation that I have for you guys is The Stranger in the Woods, The Extraordinary Tale of the Last True Hermit by Michael Finkel. This is a book that I recommend all of the time, but I never hear anybody talking about it. It's fairly short. I recommend it. It's about a hermit that went off grid, and that they explain why and how he survives in the woods through harsh climate, and it's just set in the woods. So there's isolation, and it's just really creepy and really wild. So highly recommend this one. A romance recommendation, I'm recommending November 9 by Colleen Hoover. I know you probably saw this on a lot of recommendation lists, but this is a romance story that takes place over the course of like 4 years, and every November 9th the two characters agree to meet, and it's just what happens on each November 9th and leading up to and afterwards and everything. And it's just a very unique way to tell a story, and I really liked this one. Cool Beautiful Worlds by Caroline Levitt. This is also a really great story. It feels like it's genre-less, but it's really genre-full because it has so many different things like thriller elements, historical romance elements, historical fiction elements. There's like cultish vibes in here. There is a forbidden romance in here. It's so interesting and everything is done so well. I just remember this being like totally addictive and like a flawless read. So if you can't get to it this fall, just put this on your TBR and read it whenever you can get to it because I highly recommend it. Jumping into some YA recommendations for you. The first one I want to recommend to you is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. I read this last year and really enjoyed it. It's about a group of girls that are quarantined in their boarding school because there is an outbreak of some kind happening outside, and all of the things that they have to do to stay safe, and their bodies start morphing and turning monstrous, and it's just a really interesting story. It's very eerie. There's mystery elements woven in. It's just really well done. My next YA recommendation is going to be the Raven Cycle series by Maggie Stiefvater. It's 4 books in total. So you start off with The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. Then you move on to The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater. Next up we have Blue Lily, Lily Blue by Maggie Stiefvater. And finally The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. Now, I will say that my favorite out of this series is probably The Raven Boys. You get introduced to all of the characters, and if you listen to the audiobook, it also has like sounds and stuff, so it's very atmospheric. But I loved that Blue's family kind of has like these mystical witchy powers, and I also really like the fact that they're searching for a dead Welsh king along the ley lines in this fictional town of Henrietta, Virginia. And Henrietta, Virginia, like I said, it's a fictional place, but it really comes to life, and there's woods that talk to people, and it's just a really great atmospheric read. Caraval Trilogy. The first one is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. The next one is Legendary by Stephanie Garber, and we finish out with Finale by Stephanie Garber. I have only read the first book, but if it follows the trend of the first book, I think that the whole trilogy will be a great thing to pick up this fall. The first book tells the story of this, basically it's like a town that everybody in the town is an actor of some sort, and they put on this elaborate theatrical play, and everybody in the town has their own role, but these 2 sisters really want to go and join the experience and experience the Caraval. And it's very magical and whimsical and frightening and intricate. I really liked it. I mean, these covers are gorgeous. You have your little ticket on the back to admit 1, and maybe I will have time to finish the trilogy this autumn season. We shall see. Do have a few horror book recommendations for you. I'm new to the genre, so I don't have many yet, but the ones that I want to recommend to you this year are The Troop by Nick Cutter, which I wasn't a huge fan of. However, if you love horror, specifically body horror that features like bugs and worms and like animal kind of things and just like psychopaths, this might be the book for you. Yeah, it was a really interesting, like gross story, so I still do recommend it. Next up, a recent read from me is Bird Box by Josh Mallerman. This is about a monster that if you see it, causes you to go mad and hurt yourself and other people. So everybody has to blindfold themselves so they can't see a monster. They have to hole up in a house and protect themselves. They have to be really quiet. And yeah, it's just a really good, well-crafted story. There's also the show on Netflix, so you can kind of do both, read the book, watch the movie. you know, it's a good time. Up, I want to recommend The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This story just kind of blew me away. I didn't know what to expect, but I loved the small town vibes, like the Southern women in this book club fighting vampires, thinking their neighbor is a vampire. There's children that go missing. There's rats. There's bugs and cockroaches, and there's tight spaces and just everything you can imagine. Next up, I want to recommend a book that I rated pretty low, but that was only because of the last quarter of the book, so I still highly recommend it for the fall time. Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This one, she goes to this house and it's like this Gothic house and it has Gothic vibes. There's lots of mist, there's falling leaves, there's like fungus and like strange things are happening, and there's like potions, and I don't know, it's just so cool. And I just really wish that the thing at the end would have been different, and then I think I would have liked it more. But overall, really great story. I know a lot of you guys have this on your fall TBRs already, but if you don't, I still highly recommend it. One more kind of fantasy inspired recommendation before we jump into all of my thriller recommendations. I want to recommend the Every Heart a Doorway Wayward Children series by Shauna McGuire. These books are really great. So we have Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna McGuire, Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna McGuire, Beneath the Sugar Sky by Shauna McGuire, In an Absent Dream by Shauna McGuire, and Come Tumbling Down by Shauna McGuire. Of this series so far, my favorites are definitely the first two books. So books 1 and book 2. Specifically, book 2 is like my all-time favorite, and it is the creepiest little town. Things happen. There may or may not be vampires and mad scientists and like blood sucking going on. So highly recommend, start with this. Go into this, you won't regret it. First thriller is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, and this is the story about a woman that shoots her husband in the face 5 times and then goes silent, and she is hospitalized, and there is a doctor that is trying to figure out why is she silent all of a sudden, what happened, did she do it, and there's lots of like mystery and intrigue, and it's just really good. Still House Lake by Rachel Kane, and the good news is this is the first book in a series, and I have heard that the entire series is really good. I definitely want to continue with it myself, but Still House Lake follows a woman and her 2 children that have escaped to this like lake town, and they basically escaped their father, who is a serial killer. So the wife had no idea that her husband was a serial killer until a car like had an accident in their garage and like busted down the garage, and there was like a woman hanging in there, and of course there was a trial and all of this stuff, but like the media and like other people are thinking that she helped, that she knew about it, that she was helping him cover it up, and of course she wasn't. So they have to escape that relationship and their old lives. They've changed their names, but because of everything that goes on in the media and surrounding, you know, the case, there's just a lot of sick people out there, and she's always on edge, and it causes you to be on edge and like kind of like, oh, just like I was totally anxious the entire time I was reading this, but it was such a good reading experience. Couple Next Door by Sherry LaPena. I read this quite a while ago. It's not that dark of a thriller, so if you're looking for more of a light thriller, this is about a couple that visits their neighbors at night, and then when they return at the end of the night, the baby that they left at home, they were like taking turns like walking back and forth and like checking on the baby and stuff. It's gone. Baby is gone. What happened? Who done it? Next recommendation is Dark and Twisted, and that is Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. If you're interested in this one, you definitely need to do a little bit of research because it deals with a lot of dark, heavy, sensitive topics. But this is a story of sisters and just dark and twisted stuff and family stuff, and it's just crazy. Next up is The Guest List by Lucy Fowley, which is like a classic whodunit. It's set on an Irish island out in the middle of the ocean, and there's a wedding, and there's been an accident, and what happened? whodunit. It's a classic. Next up, if you're looking for a ghost story kind of vibe, I would recommend The Sunken Motel by Simone St. James. Definitely gave off those haunted, eerie motel vibes, and it's a story told in two different timelines, one set in the 1980s and one set in present day. And the aunt went missing and her niece has come back and she's worked herself into a job at the motel, and just eerie things are happening. Before She Knew Him is about a couple that moves into a suburban neighborhood. They meet their neighbors at a block party and get invited over for dinner. Sees a trophy in the man's study and she remembers it from a crime scene, like investigation, this like murder that took place. And when she goes back to investigate to make sure she saw what she thinks she saw, it's gone. And what's really cool about this story is you're getting the point of view of the woman that thinks she saw the trophy and the man. So you know more than the characters in the story do. So it's really creepy. Next up, for a dark academia recommendation, If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. Without a doubt, one of my all-time favorites. This is a group of 7 friends that are Shakespearean actors at this conservatory school, and they play the same roles on and off stage. They've been together for 4 years, and one dark and stormy night, someone dies. So at the start of this novel, Oliver is being released from jail and he is telling the story of what happened to the man that put him behind bars. Of course, I want to recommend some Riley Sager. These are the Riley Sager books that I recommend for autumn. The first one being Final Girls, which is Riley Sager's debut novel. His newest release, Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. And this is kind of like a spooky house with possible ghosts and an investigation. And the last one I want to recommend is also another creepy building. And this one, again, creepy building, creepy people, creepy things happening, people going missing. I have 3 Ruth Ware books for you. The Woman in Cabin 10 is about a journalist and she gets a chance to go on this like luxury cruise ship with, it's like a small luxury cruise ship. There's only like 10 cabins, and she met the woman in the cabin next to her in cabin 10, and then she goes back to try to talk to this, individual, and they're gone. And supposedly no one was in that cabin. So it's like, what happened to her? Was I imagining it? Did she get thrown overboard? Where is she? What's going on? I need to know. Next up is The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. One of my favorites for sure. This one, again, it has creepy house vibes because you have a main character that goes to this smart home, and the smart home kind of like takes on a mind of its own. You also don't know if the kids are creepy. There's also a poison garden. So there's just lots happening in this one. You don't know who to trust. Next up is The Death of Mrs Westaway by Ruth Ware. And this is about a woman that goes to claim an inheritance that she knows is not hers. But she goes to this, estate that's really creepy and kind of gothic. And there's just creepy family members. And just like the atmosphere and the setting is pretty eerie. 2 books by Paula Hawkins. I have Into the Water by Paula Hawkins, which I recommend taking notes because there's quite a few characters and all of them do have their own important roles to play. Lots of suspense and lots of family drama and things like that. Next one is The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins, and this is about a woman that has the same commute on the same train every day, and she creates lies of the people along her commute, and one day she thinks she sees something and she starts inserting herself into that situation to see like what she can make of everything. The last recommendation I have for you today is a book I will constantly recommend. You might want to save this towards the end of autumn or like the beginning of winter. No Exit by Taylor Adams is that heart-pumping, action-packed thriller that you're looking for. That wraps up my fall reading recommendations. I hope you found something that you can add to your TBR this season. If you have any recommendations for me, please leave them in the comment section down below so I can check them out. But as always, thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you had a lovely day or night, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye!